share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine.
Gaga and Grumps has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Whoa, whoa. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen.
Grumps has entered the grotto.
Tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins come and let's go.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Oh, oh, gang gremlins on the scene. Oh, oh, now tap that screen. Oh, 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 oh. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says hey there boss spotter, how you doing?
Now tap that screen. Oh, oh, gang gremlins on the scene. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto.
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Now tap that screen, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Gang gremlins on
Grumps
the
says it too
scene.
high.
Gaga Grumps says I'm good tar.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins come and let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Oh, oh, gang gremlins on the scene. Oh, oh, now tap that screen. Oh, 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 oh. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Oh, oh, gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga and Grumps has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Grumps has Grumps entered the says it grotto. too high.
Gaga Grumps says oh brilliant Tickfinity not working again.
Grumps says at Busbotter Amalno hello there. Grumps says at Craig Moorheyer.
Gaga Grumps says okay let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. O. Gaga Grumps says almost. AQ without a tail. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says at AbJLXO high. Grumps says at New Hey.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like
Gaga
James has
Grumps
entered the
says
grotto.
Hey James.
on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon. Hearts be flying, like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says at James welcome back.
Lights the fire, lights the fire, lights the fire.
Grumps says at the Funky Cake House hello there. Saint has entered the grotto.
Says Olive.
Grumps says at Chris Duncan high.
Gaga Grumps
Sassy
says your word
Princess Brooke
starting
has
with
entered
O,
the
please,
grotto.
Grumps. Gaga Grumps says hasten welcome back.
Grumps says organ.
Gaga Grumps says hi there Sassy.
Grumps says at Sassy-Princess-Brooke high. Grumps says at Sand hello.
Gaga Grumps says organ you got.
Grumps says course I do.
Gaga Grumps says yellow G and N in need of new homes.
Says being.
Gaga Grumps says being fits.
Grumps says begin the.
Gaga Grumps says we have ourselves an anagram.
Says binge.
Gaga Grumps says no P not second.
Grumps says binge indeed.
Gaga Grumps says binge works.
That BKR has entered the grotto.
Fab1K3R says hi.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Grumps says at that 1K3R hail.
It's a performance.
That 1K3 or says donated 99. Donated 99.
Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within
Gaga
three,
Grumps
so
says
gifts
fireworks
flow
are
in
synced.
glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy, as in her face they slappy. Fireworks for
K3R says Mark.
Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a
Good game.
Gaga Grump says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
okay, smileys in text to win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Good game. Good game.
Fireworks for
Good
Gaga.
game. Good game. Good game.
That B1K3R says Dr. Ich bin
for the
UF
follow.
TikTok say faux Franzos. Gaga Grump says hey that biker how goes it? Gaga Grump says thanks for following biker. Gaga Grump says who's ready to play Wordle. Gaga Grump says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grump says we are starting with A. Z.
Says zebra.
Gaga Grump says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon. Hearts be flying, like a thon. Gremlins
Gaga Grump says I've given you the beat now let's see your fingers dance.
Lights the fire, lights the fire, lights the fire.
Gaga Grump says your word starting with Z please Sant.
Says zebra.
Gaga Grump says zebra you got.
Says right.
Gaga Grump says a yellow R in need of a new home. Gaga Grump says right fits. Gaga Grumps says H and T added to our homeless R.
Says throw.
Gaga Grumps says was that meant to be night sassy? Gaga Grumps says throw works. Gaga Grumps says we start with T.
Says truth.
Abyss has entered the grotto.
Abyss says truth.
Gaga Grumps says it can't be night. Gaga Grumps says hi there Abyss.
Grumps says at Abyss welcome back.
Gaga Grumps says truth fits.
Abyss says hey.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box! Don't let her lose!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those governments in the chat.
Go ahead and push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly! Which
Good
team
game.
are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go! Team Gaga, 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 Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says do the Gaga. Share the live chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. I. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Says intro.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thumb, tap and don't stop. Like
Grumps
a
says it's
thumb,
Army welcome back.
who will be crowned like a thumb, gremlin renowned like a thumb, fingers on fire like a thumb, gremlins don't tire like a thumb, hearts beat
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat now let's see your fingers dance.
Bring It On has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says hey there, bring it on, welcome back. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with I please Sant.
Says igloo.
Gaga Grumps says igloo you got.
Says liver.
Gaga Grumps says yellow I and L in need of homes. Gaga Grumps says no change.
Says child.
Gaga Grumps says list is for sassy. Gaga Grumps says child works. Gaga Grumps says still no change. Gaga Grumps says tell them.
Says yeah.
Gaga Grumps says I'm going to try plane.
MMKH has entered the
Bring
grotto.
it on, says Spain.
Mum says snail.
Says snail.
Gaga Grumps says we have placed something.
Num says it's snail.
Gaga Grumps says hi there, MMKH nice entrance.
Zami has entered the grotto. Zami says snail.
Gaga Grumps says snail it must be. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Wordle with Gaga. Will the fireworks fly?
Good game.
A random star
Gaga Grumps says, do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Get it in 3. It's do or die. Only in 3. A pretty sky. A Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says, if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next word. Gaga Grumps says, let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says, what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. H.
Grumps says at sassy-princess-brook, look at you getting your wish.
Gaga Grumps says, well done, Sassy. Gaga Grumps says, leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon. Hearts beat.
Gaga Grumps says, and you smashed the first right goal, awesome fingerwear. Gaga Grumps says, I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Busbot Romano has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says, your word starting with H, please bring it on.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No
Gaga
legs to
Grumps says, wipeouts in the chat.
Lost in the grid, can't figure it out. Oh no.
Gaga Grumps says, no plural sassy. Gaga Grumps says and Fishers has an E. Gaga Grumps says no I. Gaga Grumps says Trace works.
It's a Wordle wipeout. No letters to shout.
Gaga Grumps says wipeouts in the chat.
Lost in the grid, can't figure it out.
Gaga Grumps says it's a double.
Oh no.
Grumps says mummy.
Gaga Grumps says 3 megaseconds seriously lol.
Grumps says I dare you. Grumps says there, you.
Gaga Grumps says just a homeless U and 12 letters wiped from the board. Gaga Grumps says I've never had a triple.
Scott Moore says hi.
Gaga Grumps says no plurals sassy.
Scott Moore has entered the grotto.
Grumps
says slum.
Gaga Grumps says hey there Scott.
Grumps says it's Scott Moore hayer.
Gaga Grumps says slung works.
Wei Seo Pang has entered
Wei
the grotto.
says skunk.
Gaga Grumps says oh this is going to be a smelly one.
Carol Kelton has entered the grotto.
Scott Moore says skunk.
Bring it on, says skunk.
Gaga Grumps says highway Wellham.
Says skunk.
Carol Kelton says skunk.
Gaga Grumps says nice entrance Carol. Gaga Grumps says skunk is in the grid.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome,
Good game.
Gremlins, to the game grotto.
Welcoming
Carol
guys.
Calton says woohoo.
Settle down. Grab your
Good
heart,
game.
share us round.
Has entered the
Gaga
grotto.
Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Gang gremlins on
Gaga Grumps says GG gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it. Gang gremlins coming, let's go. Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it, tap it.
Gaga
Let's see
Grumps
those
says
teams
treasure
with
box
big
up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next one.
Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Elliot has entered the grotto.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Grumps says it. Elliot, welcome back.
Gaga Grumps says look at who is getting his wish.
Elliot says, how are you?
Grumps says ha ha.
Gaga Grumps says hey Elliot, how goes it? Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart Elliot.
Elliot says I'm good.
Mad Maxon says, hi.
Mad Max fan has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Grumps says at Mad Max fan hail.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon?
Gaga Grumps says hey there Mad Max.
Like a thon, fingers on fire, like
Monk says quiet.
gremlins don't tire, like a thon. Hearts beat flying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Mad Maxon says it. Gaga and Grumps, how are you?
Gaga Grumps says I'm good thanks.
Lights the fire, lights the fire, lights the fire.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with Q, please bring it on.
Bring it on, says Queen.
Gaga Grumps says Queen you got.
Mad Maxon says Queen.
Gaga Grumps says a green E lives at number 3 Wordle Street and needs a new home.
Mum says spent.
Gaga Grumps says sorry Sassy no
Lila has
plurals.
entered the grotto.
Lola says knees.
Gaga Grumps says spent fits. Gaga Grumps says no plurals Lila.
Lila says ye.
Gaga Grumps says T moved into number 5, N still homeless.
MKH says Nelt.
Gaga Grumps says nice Nelt works.
Organized-ish Ella teacher has entered the grotto.
We would be honored if you would join us. Explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says fireworks for
Gifts
MMKH.
explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her
Good game.
happy. As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
From a single rose to a whole bouquet.
Jimmy has entered the grotto.
Jimmy says hell.
If you can, that's okay. Smile.
Mad Max is
Still win the
Good game.
day. Fireworks for
Good game.
Gaga.
Good game.
Fireworks
game.
for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Grumps says at Jimmy welcome back.
Gaga Grumps says hey Jimmy.
Jimmy says at Grumps thank you.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart organized. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart Jimmy.
Grumps says at Mad Max fan I keep pondering a proper release of them.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Mad Maxon says want me to send Southern.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. J. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Organized-ish Ella teacher says jumpy.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire,
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Mad Maxon says I sent a heartbeat.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Mad Max.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Organized Ishella teacher says impressed by your custom songs.
Gaga Grumps says second like goal smashed, awesome finger work. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with J, please bring it on.
Grumps says at organized ish Ella teacher hello there.
Bring it on, says Jelly.
Mad Maxon says jumps.
Gaga Grumps says thank you, organized. It's to help make up for being non-speaking.
Organized Ishella teacher says at Grumps hi.
Gaga Grumps says jelly you got.
Organized Ishella teacher says shale.
Gaga Grumps says L lives at number 4 Wordle Street and E needs a new home.
Mun says stale.
Gaga Grumps says shale fits.
Organized-ish Ella teacher says ouch.
Gaga Grumps says E moved in next door to L.
Mum says guile.
Bring it on, Cesar, I'm thinking, haha.
Organized-ish Ella teacher says agile. Gaga Grumps says guile fits.
Organized Ishella teacher says in VM no.
Gaga Grumps says we have a U in need of a home.
MMKH says Uncle GG.
Gaga Grumps says Uncle works.
Jimmy says foul.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box! Don't let her lose!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly! Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here?
Gaga Grumps says doodadoo to Gaga. Share the live chat the chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Organized-ish Ella teacher says, my grandson calls me Gaga.
Jimmy says, does Grumps ever come on the lid as well?
Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says so do mine organized.
Gremlins, let's go!
Organized-ish Ella teacher says, at Gaga and Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Grumps says at Jimmy I was actually live a couple of days ago. I'm elusive like that.
Jimmy says at Grumps, damn, I missed it. I was so busy.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Grumps says cue me again.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A, W. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one
Shireen
wearing
Curly
the
has
crown
entered
at
the
the end of
grotto.
the song chooses the first word.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thorn. Tap and don't stop, like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn?
Grumps says at Shireen Curly welcome back.
Fingers on fire, like
Gaga Grumps says Shireen slides into the house.
hearts beat flying, like a thorn. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Lights the fire, lights the fire.
Shireen Curly says hello, everyone.
We would be honored if you would join
Gaga
us.
Grumps says your word starting with W, please bring it on. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Shireen.
Bring it on says water.
Gaga Grumps says water you got.
Organized-ish Ella teacher says at bring it on, good choice.
Gaga Grumps says Yellow 8 in need of new homes. Shireen Curly says teach. Gaga Grumps says teach fits. Jimmy says teach. Gaga Grumps says no change.
Jimmy says slate.
Shireen Curly says bleat. Gaga Grumps says I can't go third. Gaga Grumps says pleat fits. Gaga Grumps says E&T went home. Are still homeless. Gaga Grumps says but did they phone home first?
Organized-ish Ella teacher says it has to be first.
Gaga Grumps says yes it does.
Organized Shella teacher says adept.
Gaga Grumps says that's the pattern, not the word sassy lol. Gaga Grumps says adept fits.
Shireen Curly says no P.
Shireen Cully says agent.
Organized-ish Ella teacher says oops, you're right.
Gaga Grumps says you weren't quick enough with those peanuts. Gaga Grumps says I didn't see it either lol. Gaga Grumps says agent works.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
It's do or die, only in 3. A pretty sky. A Wordle with Gaga. A Wordle with Gaga. Da da da. A Wordle with Gaga.
Organized-ish Ella teacher says I took 5 tries today. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says I've already forgotten what today's was lol. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Crystal has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A, D.
Grumps says that's a weird way to spell W.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says hey Crystal, how goes it?
Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon. Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts be flying like a thon. Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says we haven't seen Trina all week. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says third like goal smashed, awesome work.
Grumps says at Gaga and Grumps Trina is avoiding the cake tax.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with D please Shireen.
Shireen Curly says diary.
Gaga Grumps says probably.
Crystal says it's going good. I am 1 year older today.
Gaga Grumps says Alive's at number 3 and Y at 5.
Shireen Curly says happy birthday, Crystal.
Grumps says at Crystal O, happy birthday.
Gaga Grumps says oh happy birthday Crystal. I need a birthday song. Crystal says thank you.
Ananya has entered the grotto.
It's a LLL level up. I guessed it
Gaga
wrong,
Grumps says best I've got is a level up song.
Now here
It's
we
kinda
are,
apt.
another height. If support was letters, you'd spell
Grumps says
well.
Adiva Haya.
This level's ours, come out with me now. Green, green, look at that glow. Didn't solve Wordle solo though. Support came in, guess this snap. Level unlocked, shout out chat. New fandom level, streak still alive. Wordle solved and you helped me fry. Tomorrow we guess, same time, same chat, same brilliant
We would be
brains.
honored
Remember
if you
that.
would join us.
Shireen Curly says try flaky.
Thanks for the follow.
Gaga Grumps says flaky fits. Gaga Grumps says thanks for following Anna. Gaga Grumps says nearly there. Shireen Curly says leaky. Gaga Grumps says leaky for fireworks.
Crystal says leaky.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's a performance and
Wooly has entered the grotto.
explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3.
Gaga
so gifts
Grumps
explode
says
with
Wordle in
glee.
3.
Fireworks
Let's see
for
those
Gaga.
fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says thanks for the GG's Crystal. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Crystal says you.
Gaga Grumps says you made Grumps laugh out loud. He thinks I look dead, but thank you really. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. U. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thumb, race to the top. Like a thumb.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with U, please, Shireen.
Shireen Curly says under.
Gaga Grumps says under you got.
Crystal says how do you tap that fast shoe?
Shireen Curly says haha, I don't know.
Crystal says I feel like I am gonna break my phone, lol lol.
Gaga Grumps says virtual stream deck on my phone with buttons to play the songs and type the repetitive stuff. Gaga Grumps says yellow are in need of a home.
Shireen Curly says almost a wipeout, lol.
Gaga Grumps says yep, I was ready to push that button, lol.
HB has entered the grotto.
HB says chair. Shireen Curly says start.
Gaga Grumps says nice entrance, HB. Gaga Grumps says can't be chair, doesn't live there.
Shireen Curly says start.
Gaga Grumps says start fits. Gaga Grumps says I moved into number 3, still homeless.
Debbie Van Pra has entered the grotto.
Bring it on, says Poach.
Gaga Grumps says Roach fits nice entrance, Namia.
Sarum has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says H lives at number 5. R must live at number 2. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Sarum. Shireen Curly says graph. Gaga Grumps says graph fits.
Good game.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto. Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto.
Welcome in, guys.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins.
Grab
Let's
your
see those
heartbeat,
W's in the chat.
Share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Game Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play.
Game Gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap it.
Gaga
tap that
Grumps
screen,
says
yeah,
treasure
tap it,
box
tap
up if
it.
you need a coin
Game
for your daily
Gremlins,
heart.
come, let's go. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Game Gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Game Gremlins on the
Gaga
scene.
Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle.
Stellium has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Stellium says hey y'all.
Grumps says at Stellium welcome.
Shireen Curly says hey Stellium.
Scott Moore says roint.
Gaga Grumps says hi Stellium, nice to see you. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. R. Gaga Grumps says hi Scott, didn't see you come in. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says fault like gold smashed, your fingers are on fire.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with R, please bring it on.
Scudmore says rival.
Bring it on says reach.
Gaga Grumps says reach you got. Gaga Grumps says a yellow A in need of a home.
Scott Moore says apply.
Gaga Grumps says apply fits.
Grumps says at Stuart Proctor High.
Gaga Grumps says alives at number 1 Wordle
Chris Marvin
Street
has
L
entered the
moved
grotto.
into number 4.
Bring it on, says Agile.
Grumps says at Chris Marvin hey there.
Gaga Grumps says no E for agile.
Bring it on, says no E.
Grumps says at bring it on no E.
Bring it on, says Yeplaw.
Gaga Grumps says so good it was said thrice.
Silly Billy has entered the grotto.
Silly Billy 0 says adult.
Gaga Grumps says hey Chris how goes it?
Grumps says at silly _ Billy 0 high.
Gaga Grumps says nice entrance Silly Billy adult fits.
Silly Billy 0 says hi.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's a performance and explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says fireworks for Silly Billy.
Within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga. Emojis make her happy. As in her face. Fireworks for Gaga.
Good day.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay.
Good day.
Smileys in chat still win
Good
the
day.
day. Fireworks for
Good
Gaga.
day. Good day.
Fireworks for
Good day.
Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart study.
Silly Billy 0 says Imgana go now, bye bye. Have a good day.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Shireen Curley says by Silly Billy.
Grumps says at silly _ Billy 0 see later.
Shireen Curley says bye. Gaga Grumps says a drive-by firework drop. Bye Billy. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Sophie has entered the grotto. Stacy has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. P. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word. Stacy says pizza.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says hi Stacy, nice to see you.
Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Gremlins define.
Says Pinky.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with P, please bring it on.
Bring it on, says Proud.
Gaga Grumps says hi there Surset. Gaga Grumps says proud you got.
Has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says a yellow R in need of a home. Shireen Curley says react. Gaga Grumps says react fits.
Pedgman has entered the grotto.
Gaga Grumps says E moved into number 2 and C into 4. R still homeless. Gaga Grumps says hey Pedgman. Pedgman says hello. Gaga Grumps says mercy works.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's a performance and explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
LIV
Gaga
has
Grumps
entered the
says
grotto.
let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Thanks for the follow.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Oh. Gaga Grumps says thanks for following and doing your daily heart, Pejman.
Hedgeman says onset.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says and fifth like goal smashed you rock stars. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with O, please bring it on.
Bring it on says obeys.
Gaga Grumps says obeys you got. Gaga Grumps says my finger hovered over that wipeout button, but we have an S in need of a home.
Pejman says stare.
LIV says at Gaga and Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says I don't curate the first word, but please bear in mind you can't get a lucky Wordle in one if you use plurals. Gaga Grumps says stare fits. Gaga Grumps says S lives at number 1 Wordle Street. T and they're in need of homes.
Shireen Curley says Santa haha.
Pejman says splat.
Gaga Grumps says Santa isn't valid, we have tried it before lol. Gaga Grumps says Splat works.
Fireworks for Gaga. It's sucker for
Evie says Salter.
explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode
Gaga
with
Grumps
glee.
says fireworks for Hedgeman his second in a row.
Emojis make
Good game.
happy. As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
still win the day.
Whiteheart Evie Whiteheart has entered the grotto.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Grumps says at Mazza High.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. Why? Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with O, please bring it on.
Petchman says with why not O?
Liv says can I have coins, please?
Bring it on, says Yokes.
Gaga Grumps says why sorry.
Jix says yield.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Jigs has entered the grotto.
Bring It On says it's okay, I got confused then.
Gaga Grumps says yokes you got. Gaga Grumps says senior moment lol. Pedman says crown. Gaga Grumps says there's
Oscar
my
has
in
entered
need
the
of a home.
grotto.
Bring It On says I'm shocking at this game.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says crown fits. Gaga Grumps says crow all in need of homes.
Shireen Curly says roach.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Oscar.
Shireen Kelly says BNVN.
Grumps says at ang_c_2024 hi. Pedman says micro.
Bring It On says torch.
Gaga Grumps says roach fits.
Pedman says roach doesn't work.
Stacy says, oh, can't go second.
Gaga Grumps says damn the O didn't go there.
Pedman says micro.
Nisba has entered the grotto.
Nisba says court.
Gaga Grumps says micro fits. Gaga Grumps says can't be caught. Hi Nisba.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Pedman says occur.
Gaga Grumps says C lives at number 3, R at 5. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart live. Gaga Grumps says occur fits.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box!
LIV says no problem.
Don't let her lose! Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours!
Gaga Grumps says Pedman on the roll.
Let those stickers fly!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Good game.
Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says Oobadoo Gaga. Share the ride, chat the chat, and shower her with roses and GGs. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next one. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Tyler Elysian
We
has
would be
entered the grotto.
honored if you would join us.
Shireen Curly says oh again, haha.
Gaga Grumps says there's my O again, we are starting with A. O. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Tyler.
LIV says orange.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word. Gaga Grumps says orange is 6 letters. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
LIV says on.
Gaga Grumps says blimey, you're smashing the right goal every round. Keep it up. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with O, please bring it on. And I mean it this time.
LIV says ogres.
Bring it on says onset.
Grumps says do you now?
Gaga Grumps says onset you got. Gaga Grumps says type the wrong word though lol.
LIV says go do.
Gaga Grumps says yellow S in need of a home.
Pedgman says spicy.
Gaga Grumps says spicy fits.
Shireen Curly says so close.
Gaga Grumps says S lives at number 1 Wordle Street. I lives at number 3.
Hedgeman says skill.
LIV says skill.
Gaga Grumps says skill works. Gaga Grumps says we have a homeless K.
LIV says I think Kay is living at number 5 Wordle Street.
Hedgeman says shirk.
Gaga Grumps says I think so too.
Hedgeman says my last game. It's 5 a.m.
Hedgeman says smoke.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says we only have
Cupcake
one
has entered
artist
the
left.
grotto.
Gaga Grumps says NZ or Aus Hedgeman.
Cupcake says good evening, everyone.
LIV says do it.
Pedgman says Australia.
Gaga Grumps says hey Cupcake, thanks for doing your daily heart.
Shireen Curly says evening cupcake.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box! Don't let her lose!
Hedgeman says I have a good weekend.
Is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours! Are you ready
Gaga
to
Grumps says
play?
have lots of
Let
family
those
over
stickers
there.
fly!
Shireen Curly says by Pedgman.
Gaga Grumps says you too Hedgeman, thanks for coming. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Liv says Gaga Grumps I have a dance competition tomorrow.
Gaga Grumps says let me set up the last grid of the day.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says oh good luck Liv. What type of dance?
LIV says I have a dance comp tomorrow. LIV says I'm so excited it's street and contemporary.
Gaga Grumps says excellent. You'll have to let us know how it goes. Gaga Grumps says let's play our last game of the day.
Liv says I will, don't you worry.
Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. C.
Liv says crane.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like a thorn? Gremlin renowned like a thorn. Fingers on fire like a thorn.
LIV says crane less.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says need to win the tap race lid.
LIV says you.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C, please bring it on.
Bring it on, says crate.
Gaga Grumps says crate you got. Gaga Grumps says nearly. Yellow E in need of a home.
Crystal says belly.
Gaga Grumps says belly fits. Gaga Grumps says no change. Gaga Grumps says how about spied?
Shireen Curly says spent.
Ivy says try that.
Crystal says send.
Gaga Grumps says E lives at number 4. I need a home.
Ivy says given.
Gaga Grumps says given works. Gaga Grumps says yay live.
Good game. Good game.
Crystal says nice.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 p.m. UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga.
Shireen Curley says see you tomorrow Gaga and Grumps.
Crystal says bye.
Gaga Grumps says see you then.